Now, there may be some good news for the millions of people that are currently making the federal minimum wage of about $7.25. Now, the AP reports that in at least 30 states, Democrats are actually starting to push wage increases in the run-up for 2014. That's pretty good news. Now, there are states like New Hampshire, Washington, Rhode Island, just among many that have introduced or will introduce legislation in order to raise the wages. That's fantastic. There are even measures in Republican-controlled states like Utah, which seeks to raise their wage to about $8.25. It's a start. Alabama, that would actually add a constitutional amendment to raise the wage to $9.80, and at the beginning of 2016. In Florida, that would raise their minimum wage to $10.10. Now, this is Republican states, so it's happening. The push is happening in the Republicans' backyard from Democratic lawmakers. Now, you should take that with, of course, with some caution, because it is in the Republicans' backyard. They're not likely to pass, but I'll get into the politics of that later. But get this, Vermont, home of Bernie Sanders, one of my favorite congressmen, has actually introduced or will introduce a bill that could raise the minimum wage to $12.50 by 2015 and peg it to inflation. Look at Vermont, man. You want a progressive state, Vermont's the place to go. So, now, of course, like I said, many of these have only been introduced or will be introduced, so don't get too excited. In fact, I'm pretty sure I said this before, the minimum wage is just a smart issue politically. And, if you were to latch onto this as a Democratic lawmaker, it's really smart. Not only is it good policy, it's good politically, too. Now, Americans overwhelmingly support increasing the minimum wage, and that, of course, includes Republicans. A majority of Republicans, 53% in one of the last polls, I believe it was a Quinnipiac poll that was taken just last week, shows that 53% of Republicans want to raise the minimum wage. That's a lot of support. Not only that, but you've got, of course, a majority of Democrats, obviously independents. They all want to raise the minimum wage. And so, since 2014 is coming close, you've got all these Democrats that are out there pushing the bills. Now, of course, let's be real. It is political. For the most part, it's political. Now, do I think that there are certain state lawmakers that do care about the plight of people making minimum wage? Of course. Of course. Not all of them are 100% cynical, especially when you're talking about the state level. They're not all corrupt at the state level. You get to the national level, well, that's a different story for a different day. This is an election year, 2014. And so around this time, I tend to become a little bit more cynical because that's exactly what it is. They're playing politics, and politics is politics. And of course, these politicians, they know that. They know that this is a winning issue. But nonetheless, maybe from their politics, we can actually see something policy-wise, and that would be a victory. Now, according to Neil Sroka, who's a strategist for a progressive group, said on this issue, quote, "It's a no-brainer for any Democrat." Of course. He continues, quote, "Congress is failing. They can take real action right in the states and have a demonstrable impact right here at home. For politics and policy, it's a winning strategy." So politically, it's great, and it's good policy, like I said, and income inequality is a huge, huge issue. I know because I look at it, I talk about it all the time, ad infinitum, but I think it's one of the more defining problems of our time. The other, of course, being money and politics, and it's not a stretch to say that these two things are really related, because they are. Now, it's not like that there isn't a reason for this inequality. It's not as if we can't afford to raise those wages for people. It is the greed that's stopping this. The multinationals actually keep the wages low so they can keep their corporate profits high. You see how this works? Low wages, higher corporate profits. higher executive bonuses. According to Jan Hatzius, who was a chief economist at Goldman Sachs, he said, quote, the strength in profits is directly related to the weakness in hourly wages. Well, let me show you this. Now look at that. U.S. corporate profits, do you see after the recession, picked right up. But when it comes to everything else, as far as employee wages, look at that. Wages down. Corporate profits up. That's not an accident. The only trickle down going on here when corporate profits go up is the trickle down on your head. That money's not coming back to you. That money's going straight into corporate profits, executive bonuses. And I've shown you the productivity chart before. Americans are more productive than they ever have been. But the wages are not going to you. And so if you buy into that business can't afford to pay the minimum wage line, just remember, 2/3 of all minimum wage workers work at actually the largest, most profitable corporations that have posted in the last few years record profits since the so-called recovery. So when they tell you that, they're lying to you. And they're using their paid lackeys in Congress to continue stealing the fruits of your hard work.